So we're having a really difficult day today. It seems to have just slapped us in the face that all the opportunities that we once had, or seem to have had, to move our work in a forward direction, upward direction, all disappeared in the last decade. And it's really painful to realize, really realize how alone we are, and realize how much the work is not valued, and I've been talking about it all day.
There's also a societal thing happening, and it can be tracked pretty clearly from a very specific point. Because when we started playing together, the world was pretty open to a certain extent that I was optimistic about us going out into the world and just taking our chances and feeling like, because it's so beautiful, for sure, we would meet people who loved us and who would want to have us do weddings and enjoy our music as part of their festivities.
Yeah, and what actually happened in that first year in Europe was a stark contrast compared to what we envisioned when we left. And I remember it too. We were leaving the Angel Tunnel, and we were so visionary, we were so excited, and had so much faith in the work and in the world's reception to it, that it's beautiful, so it's got to be loved.
Yeah, let's just jump off the cliff and take a chance.
And then it will happen like that really quick. And it didn't. And I don't really know how we survived in that first year, or even many of the years after that. And we've watched it slowly degrade from that point as well.
When we got to Barcelona, we discovered quite quickly that they were starting to cut down on street musicians and public performers quite heavily. I was actually, our violins were taken from us during that time.
By the police.
And so Barcelona was one of the places that I felt was one of the great performance places. I was really excited to take you to see that place.
There were a lot of places like that when we first went away to Europe in 2009, 2010, you really were believing that things had not changed too drastically from the years prior that you'd been there, and everything had degraded. Busking in Barcelona is illegal. You get your instrument taken and you have to pay the police money, like maybe 200 euros a piece, to get them back.
Plus they'll follow you if you're dressed in costumes.
If you're dressed up and you have an instrument, they treat you like a criminal. And when we go back there, it'll be the exact same. It'll probably just be 100,000 times worse.
I think it's worse, especially after that guy drove through the
Ramblas.
The Ramblas with a semi-truck or something and mowed people down.
Nobody stopped him.
And that was just the initial. That was just signs, because things have degraded so heavily since that point. And I kind of was in the mood of talking about how they degraded, because I think that it's important as a sociological statement.
What do you mean?
Well, I believe that free speech is one of the most important parts of, and the evolutionary parts of life. I think that when people get to express themselves freely, then they can express their displeasure as well as their joy. And when those are cut down, then what is left?
And
that's what I want to know.
Yeah, and we can actually correlate a similarity between people doing rebellious acts of Occupy Wall Street and things like that. All of that was shut down relatively quickly. That was hundreds of thousands of people. We're just two people. And there's not been anything since like that. They won't allow it because it was so big and it was so scary for the governments. But independent people are a threat to society. And we're one of those people. We are completely outcast and we're out. We're not part of anything. We don't have any connection to almost anyone these days. And it's been like that for a long time, but I think also the delusion has faded, that there was a fantasy that we did have connection with people and groups, and but being out here on our own it's very obvious that we're alone.
So after we went to Barcelona, we were just we got some good breaks. Then we ended up in Portugal and had a really great time. And very soon after that, within a year, or maybe even at that time, we started recognizing that people were using phones to watch us. It might have been a few or a lot, or I'm not even really clear. It just, one night after performance, we looked at each other and said, wasn't that a lot of phones people are watching us
We're in
through?
people's eyes.
Yeah.
And if I look back at the little clips of us playing in 2010 in Lisbon, I could see that people were watching us with their eyes. They were engaged. There were no cell phones, and that really, really, really has affected. It really, especially at the time when we really needed the financing to that aspect. We really needed that. We were very dependent on that at the time, and it was devastating at the time to realize that people were just filming us and walking away. It was so painful. It was so painful. And people do it to this day. It doesn't affect us so much, but it does leave us isolated in the same way.
One of the things that is interesting about that is that with the advent of Instagram and the advent of the miniature internet, miniature, people would take a snapshot of us, they would record us and film us, and that was all they needed. They were no longer needed to get a CD to get our music, because they could get it on their phone, and that was all they wanted. And so we started to see a change in sales of CDs.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, that really was...
It was a lot.
Deeply affecting. That was basically the primary mode of our income, to sell our music. And what's funny is that one of our least good albums, the live album, was the one we sold the most of. We sold over 1,000 units of it, and it was a live thing in Central Park.
And people didn't like it very much.
People didn't like it. They would see us in the street, and they would complain about babies crying and planes going over.
It was a live album.
And it's a very special little album, because it's documenting this very precious little moment between us. And I was very much a baby in the work.
So we looked at each other, recognized this as something that was starting to happen, and then we started to become aware of it in a way that made us want to see, is this happening everywhere? Where else is it happening? So we came back to New York after our European, and we discovered that it was happening in New York too.
Yeah, we started noticing it wherever we went, that if we were in Manhattan, it was happening. San Diego got really, really bad. San Francisco, Lisbon, Barcelona, Amsterdam, everywhere. It's just, everything just slowly broke apart. And we're now in this position now where we have a sense of safety and security, but we're more alone than we've ever been, and the work is more ignored, if not completely ignored, in a way that we've never experienced really, and it still affects us. It still hurts us. It still brings us down. So it's really hard to just keep on keeping on and not notice that. We won't give up. We never do. There's nothing else we can do. But it hurts us in a way that people can't really understand. And it's been hurting us for as long as we've been doing this, to be ignored, slowly have the world turn their backs on us, and people lose interest because they have their phones and their computers. And we're a live duet.
So I want to go back to that.
Sure.
So then we noticed that everybody was using phones all the time and filming us, and so we started making signs to say, if you are taking our music or taking our image, please donate. And that was an interesting thing because it became somewhat aggressive of us to ask for money, but it was more trying to explain to people that we're a live expression, and they're recording us and taking it away is somewhat of a theft. They're not talking to us, they're just grabbing the expression and going and sharing it on Instagram or wherever they were sharing it.
To make themselves look special or something.
Whatever. And so it became difficult for us. I remember writing quite a few signs about it.
Mm-hmm. Trying in various ways to
let them know.
Yeah, and in some signs we really chastised people.
Yeah,
really
we went back and
got
forth.
really mad and were very viscerally angry in the signs we made. Others were trying to be a bit more sympathetic. We tried all different ways to get people to like comprehend that they were stealing our image and our sound. And just because we're in public doesn't mean that that's okay.
It really is, for me, just a matter of respecting the originality and the quality of the work. If they are finding it interesting, then at least say hello. They take it and run, basically.
Yeah.
So that happened, and that increased more and more until I feel like there was a moment where we didn't see any eyes anymore, the eyes of people, and that's something that I love doing, is to singing into people's eyes, and the eyes disappear. To sing into a phone's lens is a very different thing than singing into somebody's eyes.
And sometimes we would never sing into camera phones. We would always try to look at people.
I would not do that.
We would kind of play with people and try to sing to them instead of have their phones on them. And it doesn't help us. It's not something that by people filming us that it does any good for our work. It helps. It's nice for them. And they have this captured moment of us.
It's kind of, it's a difficult thing that.
Yeah. And it's like that more than it's ever been. It's, even though we don't need to ask for anything from anybody, it still affects us that we're very alone up there singing, doing this thing to each other. And we're doing it for ourselves. We are absolutely doing it for ourselves, for our own self-expression, right? We're not doing it for other people. We're not entertaining people. We're not being like, yep, da 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 da. Look at us, we're so good. You should give us money. We've never been like that, and we never will be. We love just giving the work away. This affected us in a certain aspect more than it does now, but it still is there, and it's still reality, and it really we feel it. We feel the isolation of it.
So then we had the COVID business happen, and COVID's effect on people was to send them isolated and inside and on their computers and on their phones even more. And that created a separation even greater, because people no longer, they're warning not to be near each other and keeping distance, etc. So their phone became their only way of connecting with us, and they took it, and we had no idea about them. But as they also were isolating themselves, we no longer, they started seeking all of their entertainment online. And so seeking us online became completely something not being done anymore.
Because, and I wasn't able to I understand why I wasn't able to consistently share content online, was because we were trying to survive. We were just trying to get through and survive the experience. And so the idea of me putting so much time and energy into something that wasn't really giving us anything and also a platform in which people could lash out and judge us, which people definitely did over the years, which also affects me and us. So it's it almost feels like we missed the boat. It almost feels like we're just kind of floating around here in no man's land. We're doing the best we can, we always will. But it really does feel like we missed some kind of something, and I don't know if it's going to be possible anymore after so much time of things degrading to such a degree in the public world. It might have been possible at a time when Thoth had his documentary made. It might have been possible when we first met each other and I was young and we were still pretty young and vital.
As people got online and were seeking their entertainment more online, and Spotify grew, Instagram grew, all these Zoom, all these things, all these applications and platforms grew bigger and bigger because people were forced to be online more. We felt like our live expression was not being experienced or sought as much, and it wasn't. Our audiences dwindled quite a lot during the time right after when everything started opening again, when COVID, and so we were confused about that. It was scary for you because you had a breakdown about it because there was no audience. Nobody was watching us anymore.
I had a major breakdown. Yes, we watched it all. We had a last gasp, you could say, with audiences at the Love Tunnel through the pandemic, 2.5 years of playing to relatively very large audiences in the wintertime in the cold with lights on us, which no one's really seen online because I wasn't sharing the vlog.
There are no captures of that?
Oh, I have. It's all up there. It's just people have to go back and look. Have to find them. Have to go like searching.
Have to go
treasure hunt, researching. Yeah, and people are not interested enough to really bother doing that. And I'm really proud of those experiences that we had. We did some beautiful performances. So that was really a last gasp, last hurrah, so to speak. And it all started really fading away. And then my mother passed away, and we gained a kind of freedom that we've never had. And so everything, it's basically like everything faded when we were able to escape, and that we're okay, at least. But we're still kind of floating in we're lost. We feel lost, and hopelessness sets in. And I think that's the nature of being an independent artist. We're never going to give up the work that we do because we believe in it. But I don't really know anybody else who does.
So once we started traveling, I started to notice that in Mexico, a lot of the musicians, public performers, would do whatever they did, and then they would walk around with their hand out for people and to give them money. And I started to get a very strong reaction that that public performers were no longer respected for their service, but they had to beg for money. And it's possible, and it's also true that in this country, I think people are not as wealthy. But that touched me very strongly. I have never been one to go after I've performed and with my hand out to people and ask for anything.
Which everyone does.
And everybody here does that. Everybody.
We would never do that. Even when we were the most desperate and we were in the most horrific, scary position, we never did that. It's amazing. We always made art. We always made it and did it in a noble way.
And when I saw this happening, it actually affected me in a very strange way. It made me not want to go out and perform. It made me not want to perform, and the strongest feeling I had of that was in Guanajuato. In Guanajuato, all of the musicians are so beggar centered. They're all with their hands out, with their hats out, and very aggressive at asking people who are going into the restaurant, walking around to each table with a hat, and it made me feel sad for them, but it also made me not want to be in that kind of do that.
We don't do that.
Do it in the opposite way. I mean, I've always been considered the word free. I have always considered myself public service, and never ever a beggar. Even if people think of me as a beggar, I've never conceived of myself as such. I felt that my energy and our energy is a public service, bringing harmonies and a frequency to the public that they can't get anywhere else, lifting people's spirits, lifting them up. So I couldn't play for a while. I was so it held me down in my heart.
Mm-hmm. Even though we're not anything like that, we're not anything like those kind of begging busker experiences, it's still, people leave with a bad taste in their mouth in a place where people are doing that. It gives the public art form a bad name, and that's notorious within the world of street performances, that the people who are greedy and selfish and self-serving and self-interested and beggars and thieves and all that, they give the public art thing, music thing, dance thing a bad name.
Now I feel like that's what people have a feeling towards public performance. They think of it as begging.
Well, maybe they always have.
Maybe
we've just been delusional, thinking that people didn't think that about us or something.
In spite of that, it's, if they thought, or I was always holding a very strong intent in my performance.
And it doesn't matter what people think. At the end of the day, there's nothing we can do about that. But it is oppressive. It is an oppressive feeling of loneliness and isolation. I know I'm banging this on, saying this over and over again, but it's true. And I can worry when we're in this mental state. I can worry and think, both of us can think too much about when Thoth dies, because he's 33 years older than me, and what am I going to do when, yes, I will be able to take care of myself, and I'll be able to feed myself and house myself and get myself around, but how will I feel when we're alone now and we feel isolated now? How will I feel when he's no longer around? That's just a horrifying thought for both of us. And
So where we are now is we're playing in a gazebo in a lovely Mexican town. All of the public performers are very much showing a beggar mentality, and we go to the gazebo, we play, and we sing to each other for about half hour, and sometimes we're surrounded, sometimes there's nobody, but we're rarely spoken to anymore. We're rarely inquired, and yet they're all taking cell phones of us. You can feel it, you can see it. It's interesting to
and
be
they're
in
all
that
staring
kind of
at us.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I wave at people, which I do sometimes, they'll just stare at us. There's no concept that maybe we're human and we have a need to connect with people.
So we're left in this position.
Yeah.
Here's where we are, and I have a very imaginative mind. I wonder if the world is so wrapped up in their phones that they no longer can experience life, real life. I imagined a cartoon where two people, ostensibly us, are performing this extraordinary thing while somebody's on their phone looking at a performance in their in their phone while we're doing that.
Yeah, and the people do that all the time when they're listening to music, watching a music video of some famous individual, and we're right in front of them doing this beautiful thing. Yeah, that's
And they have earplugs in. That's a thing that I didn't get used to. Where it took me a long time to realize that many people now have earplugs in when they're listening to
music, so they don't even look up. They can't see us. They can't hear us. It's basically shut off the world from experiencing us. And it's funny because that statement that he just made me think of when we used to play all over the world, all the places that we've played everywhere. A common statement would be, so where are you guys performing? You know, that there would be this statement after we'd just done a performance in a public space, and they'd say, so where are you guys performing? And I'd be like, we're performing right now. What do you mean? And what they mean is it's a backhanded demeaning. It felt like that. Maybe it wasn't anybody's intention, but that happened too often for me to count, of this kind of demeaning statement, almost stating that what we're doing is not really performance because it's outside and it's free, and so it has no value. We're only doing it as a means to an end, to promote a show that we're doing. And it was always difficult to say, no, we don't have any show to promote. This is what we're doing. People could never really believe that the public work that we did and do still was the only thing we had to express this work that we do. There wasn't anything else. It's not like we were doing a tour and this was just for fun. This has been the only thing. And I don't see how that will change. It's really difficult. It's been over a decade of us being together and we're not getting any younger. So how would that ever change? And that's really painful to realize that possibly the chances are getting slimmer and slimmer for people to really recognize and see what we do.
I'm looking towards people, and as I said, I don't feel people are in contact with life anymore, and I am constantly run off the sidewalk by somebody who's working on their smartphone and not looking up or going and just marching through texting somebody, and that has nothing to do with performance. So as far as I can tell, or as far as I know, I'm not sure that anybody really is engaging with us anymore. And that, again, I have to, what does that mean? What does that mean for the world and the evolution of our beings? Are we headed towards robotry? Yeah. Where people all have visors on, because it's pretty close to a visor, a power phone that just put it up on your face.
Everybody's walking around.
Google suggested that recently, and Apple did.
Yeah.
So that's where I am. I'm just in my thing, right? But I wanted to talk about that because that's an interesting de-evolution. When I look out and I see a bird fly across and I hear the bird tweet, I feel the sun rays and I see the trees whisper, and hear and see the trees whisper, and as they flutter in the wind, that is life. I cannot experience that on a smartphone. I can't experience that on a computer. And I've chosen not to use a smartphone. I've chosen to be pretty distant from my computer in certain ways, constantly trying to gain a high frequency of connection with the world.
Use the computer for creativity.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And then I have that question of, if the entire world is brainwashed by something and one person is not brainwashed, and they know that everybody's brainwashed, what is that person? Is that person insane and a menace to society?
Well, that's kind of the way that society makes it seem. That by isolating you, and it makes you feel like I must be out of my mind to be pursuing something that is not internet focused, online focused, computer focused.
And here we're using the computer
to share
purvey this to.
Yeah, to share our message, because it's really the only way right now that anybody can know what's happening to us. And I do find it ironic that the few people that do watch these and watch them all the way through, are mostly strangers. Maybe they've found us online somewhere, or they saw us once and tried to find us online, and it's maybe only one individual who's seen us live and loves us from that standpoint and follows us. It's just ironic that now it feels like we're kind of dangling at the end of the world, and the people that are watching are strangers.
So do we have anything more to say?